Now that's Bobby McFerrin. There's no instrument in that track at all.
Isn't there? Is it just people going Oomba Doomba?
It's all him.
Isn't that clever?
His voice and thumping his chest and all that.
Very clever. Genius.
Why is it that young Rankin and his sister Phoenix seem so unhappy? Hell, they should be more grateful, what, with their tennis, swimming, martial arts, football, piano, guitar, clarinet, drama and cooking classes. Their parents are giving them every opportunity in life and in return they act all miserable.
Well, according to happiness expert Dr Timothy Sharp, the busyness epidemic sweeping through Australian families is creating a generation of unhappy kids. And to see how we can fix it, Dr Happy, as he likes to be known, joins us now. Good morning, Tim.
Morning, Tim.
Morning, thanks for having me.
Tim, what's going on in our lives? Are our lives getting busier or are our children getting busier within our lives?
Well, both, I think. Both. I think these days there are a lot of parents, both of whom are working. There's a lot more options these days, so a lot of us are generally busier. And as a result, I think a lot of parents need to keep their kids busy because they've got to give them something to do. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to be busy and it's good to take advantage of some of the options that are available. But I think it's a pity if we miss out, and particularly if our children miss out, on some rest and playtime, unstructured playtime. And I think that's happening, and it's causing unnecessary distress amongst younger generations, I think. How do you know?
How do you know we're breeding a generation of unhappy kids?
Well, there's two things. Well, the research suggests that rates of psychological problems, things like depression and stress and anxiety, are increasing. We probably need to be a little bit careful about how we interpret that, because it may well be that we're just getting better at identifying it. Yeah. In fact, there's no doubt that we are, because we talk about it more now, which is a good thing. We're probably getting better at identifying it. So although the statistics look like they're increasing, some of that might just be due to more openness about these sorts of problems. So yeah, the research suggests that children are getting a little bit more stressed and depressed, but what my focus on is not so much about managing that, but actually about how to make them happier. Because it's one thing to manage stress and depression, it's another thing to actually create happiness, which is really what we do at the Happiness Institute.
How do we do it, and how easy is it to make happy kids?
Well, it depends on where you're starting from, I suppose. It's all relative. Look, obviously for some people it's very natural, it's very easy for some parents and for some children, and that's great. So a lot of parents, a lot of families are already doing some great things, and when I talk to parents and I hear some of the stories they tell, it's wonderful to hear some of the creativity and you know, some of the great ideas that some people do to create happiness in their family. But I suppose if I had to, the more and more I've talked about this over the last few weeks since my book came out, the more I come back to thinking that one of the key things we need to do is just spend time with our children. You know, it's great that more people are busy. It's great that particularly, you know, women have more opportunities these days. But I think we do need to be very careful that we don't outsource our parenting, that we don't outsource our children and keep them so busy in other classes and at school and in extracurricular activities, because there's no doubt that one of the most important things for our children's health and well-being is quality, well, not just quality time with our children, but quantity time. I think it's it's hard to have good quality time without quantity time.
Have children revealed to you or to experts in the field exactly what it is that they feel makes them happy?
Oh, my children tell me every day and every night.
What is it?
I don't know if I agree with them. Well, if you ask the children, you know,
Freddos,
exactly,
computer games,
and sugar, and yeah, exactly whatever I want at that minute. So you know, it raises an interesting point. Obviously, we want to talk to our children and listen to them and understand what makes them happy, because it does vary from child to child and family to family. But one of the things that I talk to parents about is understanding what happiness really is and what it isn't. And when I talk about happiness, I'm not just talking about having the immediate needs met in that moment. It's not just about pleasure from minute to minute. Happiness, as I talk about, is about pleasure. It is about having good times, and maybe that means a game or a lolly every now and then, but it's also about a more enduring aspects, like a meaningful and purposeful life. It's about building quality relationships, and sometimes these things take time, and sometimes you know, we can't always have what we want now. We need to look more longer term.
Tim, I think as a parent, and you mentioned working parents, you know, particularly have another focus, which is, you know, their job. But how do parents recognise these signs of stress in their children before it's too late, before they have a really miserably unhappy child?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And one of the best ways to recognise these things is to have a good relationship with them. The closer you are, and this goes for any person really, the closer you are to someone, the more likely you are to know them and to pick up on small changes to identify when something's going wrong. So, you know, if you only see your kid for an hour a week, and I'm exaggerating a bit there, but, you know, if you don't have a lot of time with them, if you're really, really busy, then you're more likely to miss these things. So one of the things, again, comes back to spending a lot of time with them, having good quality relationships, and particularly having open channels of communication. The more open we are to be able to talk, and that goes both ways, the more likely the child is to be able to actually tell you if something's going wrong. But also you can look out for obvious signs like, you know, difficulties at school, for example, problems performing in the classroom, maybe social issues. These are some of the signs and symptoms that might be indicative of other problems.
And what are the effects of prolonged unhappiness on a child?
Oh, well, they're quite significant. I'll flip that over first. What we know about happy children is that they outperform unhappy children in almost every way. So happy children tend to do better if you control for other variables. Happy children tend to do better at school. They tend, you know, they perform better academically, socially, which is very important and not surprising. I mean, who would you rather hang out with, a happy person or a non-happy person? So, yeah, if your child's happy, he or she's more likely to have good quality relationships. And good quality relationships are very important because what they do is two things. If we have good quality relationships, we experience more positive emotions and more positive experiences. But also if we have good quality relationships, that buffers us against stress and depression. It protects us against things like bullying, for example. You know, kids that have got a couple of good friends have someone that they can turn to in the face of adversity.
Do we know about the long-term physical effects of children who are highly stressed and unhappy?
Well, probably yes and no. I think anecdotally and sort of in secondary and tertiary sort of level research, we can say that it's certainly not good. We know with adults, for example, that significant levels of depression are correlated, highly correlated with some serious health problems like obesity, with cardiovascular disease and things like that. So, look, it wouldn't surprise us. I'm not aware of any longitudinal studies that have really looked at children over a long period of time, but it wouldn't surprise me if we found the same sorts of things that we find with adults. Yeah, look, it makes sense, there's no doubt. Because when people are depressed, they tend to engage in fewer healthy behaviours. They don't exercise as much, they don't eat as well, so then it leads on to other problems that those things lead to as well.
Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you mentioned exercise there. We know that when you exercise, you release all those wonderful endorphins. You know, I can't help but worry that kids who are too stressed, rushing from activity to activity, don't actually get time just to go and run around and have that great endorphin release.
Yeah, well, there's two things about being over busy. One is that if we're not getting enough exercise, as you said, that's not a good thing because exercise is actually a potent antidepressant. Exercise is probably one of the cheapest, most effective stress management tools we can all use as adults as well. But the other bit about busyness is not just missing out on exercise, but also missing out on rest. I think we've lost the art of doing nothing, and I don't mean being lazy, and I don't mean bludging or. In particular, our kids have lost the art, and a lot of parents are scared to leave their kids with what we technically call unstructured play, because during unstructured play, that's actually when children can use their imaginations, they can use their creativity, come up with new, absurd and ridiculous ideas. But that's really, really important for their psychological and cognitive development.
To enjoy the imagination. Just before we go, Tim, I know you're known as Dr. Happy because of your expertise in the area of positive psychology. What typically is it that stops someone from attaining a positive outlook in life? Are there certain blockers that you can see in most?
Oh, well, there's a couple of... Look, it does vary from person to person, but there's a couple of big guns, I suppose. One is that there's no doubt that it's partly genetic. So some people are just born with a luckily born with an optimistic attitude. It just comes naturally to them. Other people aren't, and there's not much we can do about that. But the good news is that that's not 100%. There are other things that that determine our outlook that we do have some control over. So one of the other things is our upbringing, which is why it's so important for parents. As parents, if we can encourage and foster and reinforce a positive outlook, then hopefully our kids will develop more optimism, which will set them up fantastically for life. And then the third thing is, to some extent, optimism is a skill. and in my book and in other books, we can teach people how to think differently. We can teach our kids how to look at situations. You know, there's always more than one way to look at a situation. And if we can help them to choose the more helpful, more optimistic ways, then they're going to both enjoy more good times, but also deal with the difficult times better.
Oh, that's good advice. Thank you, Tim. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim's book, 100 Ways to Happy Children, is out now.
Absolutely. Let us know what you think. Email us in and let us know what you do to make your kids happy. Do your kids do lots of spend lots of downtime doing nothing?
They do.
Yeah, ours too.
My children really do love to live inside their heads.
Yeah.
They've always read lots of books and they've always enjoyed their imagination.
Great
they've always
downtime,
drawn,
yeah.
and I think that's very important, what Tim was saying, you know, allow the imagination forth.
Yeah. We're renovating at the moment, so the kids just like to get out in the backyard and make mud pies, just make a mess and hammer things together with little offcuts of wood and stuff. It's great to watch.
Good to see.
Good and creative. All right, time now for some home shopping.